Also the public storm that was here prior to this house. But as we like to call it, this is a place for people in storm and calm. Everybody's welcome here. Last year we had 615 activities and arrangements here, and almost 400,000 people visited this house. You're always welcome here, and we hope you take the time to visit the building while you're here today or on Friday. So welcome to this public library.
Thank you, Stina. I am Torald Fagertun. I work for the Nordland County Library. I'm here to introduce this film. We're going to watch a short film set on Røster, the very island we are visiting tomorrow. And besides being an absolute stunning place, it's also one of Norway's most fisheries-dependent communities. The film follows fisherman Roy Rønneberg through his daily life at sea, offering a close and personal glimpse into a life shaped by tradition, resilience, and a deep knowledge of the ocean. At the same time, it tells a more troubling story of declining fish stocks and growing uncertainty about the future. But still, please enjoy the film.
Ja, det her blir 45. sesongen min på Lofothavet. Jeg gikk ut av 9. klassen i 1979, og da begynte jeg å leve da. Jeg startet vel som engler i englerbua, og så gikk jeg over til å være på havet. Og aldri angret. Man tviler litt en gang man var 7 år og var med på skyen og bare spydde, men da glemte vi fort. Så for min del, og antagelig Geir sin del også, vi har aldri hatt med andre planer enn å bli bare fiskere. Torsken og vinter nå, han vil ha reker, derfor regner vi med reker i dag. Jeg er jo 5. generasjon fisker på Røster. Far min var jo fisker, og så broren min var fisker. Nå er jeg jo alene på havet. Han Geir var jo sammen med meg 33 år. Så egentlig, så når jeg står her og egner alene, når han er borte, så har man mer tanker oppi hodet man er på havet. For at når man er på havet nå, så man er alene, så har man det så travelt at man får ikke tid å tenke på sånn her så mye. Vi fisker jo på skreien som kommer opp i Turbarenshavet, og det er jo gytinga her som skal bety hvordan han skal klare å overleve som torskstamme, så vi er veldig avhengige av at han får lov å gyte her i Lofoten og nordover her. Ja, akkurat her som ligger draglina nå, der har jeg hatt lina mi fast om vinteren siden i 2018. Jeg begynte med lina igjen. Når vi har garnene ute, så var vi ikke på det her havet, for det er oppdelt havene av garn og lina. Vi er liksom privilegerte at vi har litt faste plasser i Røster, vi er lite linpotter, så vi går dit hvert år og setter. I dag har 1200 ungler jeg skal dra. Det blir 4 stamper lina, og for 200-300 kilo per stamp. Så er 300 ungler, så er det veldig bra. Nå skal du se her. Her ligger båten min. Der. Og baugen er frem, som vi bruker å si ved fiskere. Og så har du båten her. Så ligger jeg og drar lina inn her. Står hun her bortover båten. Og så har vi dragen der, og så har vi inn her. Og så får vi fullt av hengeunglene borti gjennom her, og så er det renger, så er det stein. Så henger unglene her med reka på. Så kommer torsken, og så biter han på. Så drages det inn om i båten. Og har beregnet det i en stam. Det er 300 ungler. 300 ungler på. Og denne stampen her, han er 750 meter lang. Nei, det er jo hektisk nok når man står på. Man skal fiske en torskkvote alene, men da går noen om ikke drar. Jeg bruker å dra 4 stamper alene for dag, og da bruker som regel høy for å fiske torskkvoter som jeg har i dag. Så det er et litt lettere arbeid enn vi har i den tiden vi går på for fullt. Det var da 3 ganger så mye bruk og sene kvelder. Når jeg er ferdig, så er det nye stamper stående bak i båten. Så når jeg kommer hit, så snur jeg, og så setter jeg ut denne lina igjen, så jeg har den til neste dag. Men Geir sa ikke noe om han har vondt. Han var på skyen, han spydde i 12 timer. Han klaget ikke. For han måtte jo gjøre arbeidet sitt. Jeg har jo en bror som var ansatt på båten min i 33 år. Og så døde han bare plutselig. Han var bare 56 år. Vi avsluttet jo vinterfiske 15. april, og Geir døde jo 17. april. Jeg hørte jo han Geir sa han har vondt i venstrearmen, at han var dommen og trodde han har betennelse igjen, men han har jo like vondt i høyrearmen, så du får ikke noen signaler på at det kan. Fisksorter, altså vi plusser bare fra noen dager, så drifter vi hele året. Så det gikk der gjennom egentlig. Og så vokste nok kvotene utover 90 til 2002-2003, da har vi 2 torskkvoter vi fisker. Så vokste jo det her, og så dør jo han Geir perioden, og så 20 så begynner jeg å gå nedover, 2020. Og i dag skal vi jo ned på samme kvotene som vi har i 90 igjen. Man får skjelt på i dag, og da var vi fisket fritt på andre fisksorter. I dag er det kvotebelagt alt det andre, så vi kan risikere vi blir stoppet, de som skal prøve å kompensere med litt lav torskkvoter. Og da så egentlig kan fiskes fritt, da blir så overbelastet igjen at da også blir utfisket igjen. Så jeg tror nok vi står for en farligere utvikling nå enn vi gjorde da. Det er klart, når det er nedfisket bestand, så må vi ha kvoter. Det må bygges opp ordentlig det der. Det er for mye opp og ned på kvotene. Vi skal skåre ned i botten og så skåre på toppene, at vi har litt mer gammel uttak. Men kvotene de måtte komme, vi er begynt å bli så effektive nå, så tømmer vi havet. Samfunnet på Røst sliter med en liten flåte. Vi er jo bare mer og mer oppspist kystflåte. I dag må du kjøpe det kvoter, så det er fryktelig tungt å komme seg inn i det her og veldig dyrt. Kvotene flyttes jo oppover, og kommer på toppen, så bærer de ut på fryseri og så ut til landet med fisken. Og til større de blir, til mer de fisker, til mektigere er det, til mer sprenger de i korridorene på Stortinget, til lettere får de sitte gjennom en vifors og sitte på øy ute i havet. Det er de sterkestes rett, og det er jo ikke bra. Da får du press igjen på fiskebestandene. I Røst har torsken kommet bestandig. Nå ser det ut som han trekker lenger nord og gyter, så det spørs egentlig. I min tid har det jo skjedd mye som forandret både på fuglen og fisk. Fuglen er jo til dels borte nå. Og maten i havet blir mindre. Da vi så ut på havet før man fulgte av fugl, så fløy det er borte nesten nå. Og makrellen er kommet så vi ikke har før. Og havet fullt av krabbe, det har vi ikke heller før i Røst. Det er mer strøm i havet. Da jeg startet opp min yrkeskarriere, så var ikke vi på havet om søndagene, da var det stopp på alle, da fikk torsken gyte i fred og alt. Men i dag så går det 7 dager i vekka. Så havet får aldri være i ro. Særdeles de store snurvebåtene som tauer til alle døgnets tider, så det får aldri være i ro havet. Så det er nok lettere å fiske tomt i dag enn det var før. De første 3 årene jeg drev med lina, nå er jeg bare alene, så drev jeg jo på innersida. Jeg var jo torsken på innersida. Nå har han trekk på yttersida. Senere på sesongen så trekker han nordover mot Lofotodden. Noen av fiskerne som her, disse er fleksible båter, fremmedbåter. De går ifra Røst og fisker de siste utfor Lofoten. Så han trekker nordover og gyter, så om det er klimatingene som gjør det, det vet jeg ikke, men han leter noe etter rette temperatur og gyter i. De siste 30 årene er min erfaring at fisken har søkt seg mer og mer nært bottene. Så før i tiden så kunne vi fiske her oppe. Kanskje 25-30 favner fra botten, og i dag så fisker vi her nede for 90% av tiden. Så torsken han har søkt seg på juften nærmere bottene, og om det er temperaturene som gjør det, det vet vi ikke. Jeg tror ren mat skal bli attraktivt med tiden, for plutselig en dag så produseres jo ikke ren mat. Og tørrfisken det er jo ren mat, de har jo ikke noe med han. Tørsker han bare og sender han og selger han, går rett på tallerkenen. Hvis vi ikke overfisker, så varer det her uendelig. Kan vi fiske i mange tusen år hvis vi bare er folk på jorda så lenge så. Det er jo fisken og torsken vi lever her ute. Svikter da, så blir det ikke så bra. Siger han og gyter en annen plass, så blir ikke samfunnet sånn som det har vært. Det blir ikke da. Da begynner med kjøperne at de må få fisk på gjellene, så kan vi nesten ikke bo her, for vi er avhengig av at de er. Det her med nå at torsken forsvinner, det er litt sånn skummelt. Det har gått veldig fort de siste årene.
Hva tenker du om det?
Nei, det er jo litt sånn, skal du sove godt, så må du jo ikke så tenke så helvetes på det. Det er ikke bra. Jeg tror nok vi har rotet det til litt, men kanskje kan jeg rette på seg. Det der med skreien, han klarer ikke å planlegge hvor han kommer. Plutselig kommer han tilbake igjen, det her vet vi ikke.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, sorry, I'm still me. And now we have a new wonderful panel. I just introduced it, then I will give the floor to Marcia. The new panel is behind tourism, hospitality that regenerates places, communities, and the future. The potential of regenerative tourism. So, throughout this symposium, we are exploring hospitality from historical, cultural, and social perspectives. This panel brings that reflection into the present and looks toward the future. It asks an important question, in my opinion. How can tourism become a force that regenerates communities and territories rather than simply consuming them, especially communities that are facing what they are explaining in this wonderful movie. Through concrete experiences and examples, our speakers will explore how regenerative tourism can contribute to caring for places, strengthening local community, creating new opportunities, and building a more sustainable future for the people who live there. So, we are fortunate to have with us 4 distinguished speakers. First of all, Marcia Liuzza, who thought this panel. She is a cultural heritage and tourism expert and much more, I could add. She is PhD candidate at the University of Venezia and Padova with a very interesting thesis on tourism and Via Querenissima with the focus on Røster. She is also member of the scientific committee of Via Querenissima and would like to add one of the most interesting young voice promoting sustainable and regenerative approaches to cultural roots and territorial development. Then we have 3 other wonderful speakers. We have Anne-Heidi Hansen. Now she is Senior Advisor in Tourism at the Nordland County Council. She, I don't know, maybe you can sit when I call your name. You can start to sit there, yeah, maybe. So, Anne-Heidi Hansen, now she's Senior Advisor in Tourism at the Nordland County Council. She has played for many years a leading role in the development of a responsible visitor management and regenerative tourism strategy in northern Norway. Welcome. Then we have Dorte Eide. She's Professor of Organization and Management at the Nord University Business School. She's also member of the scientific committee of Via Querenissima. She's a very well-known scholar whose research focuses on innovation, sustainability, value, co-creation, and regenerative approaches in tourism, culture, and food system. Then we have Xavier Saleh-Buffil. Welcome. project leader, entrepreneur, and co-founder of Coco Sapiens, working at the intersection of food systems, gastronomy, and territory, with a particular focus on regenerative practices and local economic development. So, yeah, you are 1, 2, 3. Ah, she's that daughter. Okay, sorry. I was a little so. I presented 4 people and that see, I'm old. Sorry, I did some time. So I now delight to give the floor to Marzia Luzia, who will chair and coordinate this panel. Thank you and enjoy the discussion and debate.
Yeah, of course. Okay. So thank you, Stefano, and welcome to this panel. I'm very glad to be here with you. And of course, we decided to have a space of reflection on regenerative tourism, also because hospitality for tourism enhances the most important relational and social part of tourism. So how is it structured, this event? I'm introducing you the concept of regenerative tourism, and I share some insight from my case study in Røster, and then we will have our speakers, Anne-Heide, that she will talk about the regional strategy on Nordland County Council based on the regenerative approach, and also, as Stefano said, the Professor Dorte Eide with 2 concrete examples from the Norwegian territory, and last but not least, Xavier, okay, that he will have a focus on the food system that are an important part of the regenerative, of the tourism experience. So, sorry, I just opened my presentation. new approach, regenerative tourism, is inspired by the indigenous way of thinking. For the indigenous, people are not outside the nature, not just take care. We are part of the nature, okay? We can actively contribute with our action to try to have better places. So every action as human, as an individual, but also as a community, can have impact for the other. And this is the second point of regenerative tourism that pointed out. People, residents, but also tourists. For residents, as I told you before, understanding that we're not just outside the touristic destination, that it could be seen something that is abstract or has to be managed by only the institutions or the strategic stakeholder, but I'm part of this destination. Destination is a place, is for the people, is not just its home, okay? So I can have a huge impact. For tourists, also here, shift the focus, not to see just a destination, but understanding that that destination for the people who live there is family, is work, is the daily life, it's home, it's life. And so starting to think about tourists not just a consumer, but as a person who can contribute in the entire living system. In the middle, there is the relationship, there is reciprocity, there is the well-being for people to create condition for a better life, to flourish in the life, and to improve in the daily life for the people who live there, but also well-being in order to have a very deeply experience for tourists, a quality experience. And hospitality, in what is hospitality means encounter, as also this morning we see, encounter, so people with different knowledges, different culture that meet and create shared heritage. And also this is pointed out by the regenerative approach, so mutual benefit, mutual learning, and mutual transformation. The question is not more what we can offer to tourists, but who we are, what we want to offer, who are the people involved, which are the benefits, and our unhated then afterwards will explain you in detail with her case study. And the last point is the unique potential values. In the regenerative tourism, there are no standardized model. There are some key principles, okay, but each destination, each place has to find its unique potential values. Starting to understand and also to start from learning from the territory. Territory means values, people, tangible, intangible heritage, and starting from these unique potential values to start to think about what we want from tourism. Okay? And regarding all these principles were applied in my case study in Røster. As Stefano mentioned before, I have this PhD project on Via Querenissima, and my case study is in Røster. The aim of the thesis is to develop a methodology for promoting form of tourism that concrete generate value for the people along the entire Via Querenissima. And I selected Røster as a pilot project. So with the Røster population, we carried out together this Røster Tourism Manifesto. Regarding the structure of this project, at the heart, okay, there is the regenerative tourism. But of course, also the sustainability with its key macro areas, so social, cultural, environmental, and economical, was taken in mind the structure. I conducted 20 interviews with the inhabitants, And I will expose this work at the end of June in a public event in order to collect more feedback and then elaborate the final version of this tourism manifesto. And the community-based approach, because the community is the focus on this work. We co-create this work together. And then, of course, the analysis of the context, so seeing what's happening at the national level, at the regional with the Northern County Council, and also, of course, in the municipality. And then the manifesto. But what is this manifesto? This is a framework, a governance framework, in which the residents say what they want, their concern, their values, but especially they establish the boundaries beyond which tourism is no more welcome. Why this is a governance framework? When I studied the context of Røster, I see the current activities carried out by the municipality, but it means something that can put all the voices together. First one, from the perspective of the community, not what Røster want to, what the visitor can see in Røster, but what the population want from tourism. Because tourism is an option, is not something that you must have to develop tourism. Do you want to develop tourism? Yes or no? If yes, in which way? What do you want for tourism? Which part do you need to enhance? Which part do you want to take care from tourism? And so this is an operational tool that translates their principle into concrete guidelines. But just to give you an overview about what's happening with this tourism manifesto. So, thanks to the response values. First one, authenticity. Authenticity means offer authentic experience to promote the real culture, as they told me, the real Røster. And tomorrow you will understand what I mean. And also authenticity, thanks to authenticity, maintain these values helps to avoid the problem of tourism, the problem to the mercification of the nature, not to stereotypize through social media or through photos. And then, of course, their hospitality. For them, Pietro Querini's story is an inspirational behavioral model. Take care of the environment, but also to the visitors. Inclusivity involve tourists in their daily life. And then a living fishing village. They define itself as a living fishing village. Pointed out living as a living heritage and fishing, that is the main economical research. And then tourism as a catalyst for regeneration of places, places, skills, but also as a mindset that has to follow the tourism management. More important are the limit and the threshold beyond which tourism is not more welcome for them. And these are also potential point of tension, because they are in a moment that they want to develop tourism, okay? So tourism is not to affect the ecosystem, especially birds and especially some part of the island that are fragile. The infrastructure is another important point. They told me that especially during the summer, with the Lofoten as full of tourist transport, the transport are a real problem, because they use, for instance, to reach Buda for medical questions, for work, for family, and they are fully booked. So it's a problem. It means that if we develop tourism on Røster and we not manage the quantity of tourists that take the transportation, this could be a very important point of tension for them. And then the fishery, if in the values, in the founding principle emerge as a values, they are also a threshold. It means that tourism has not to reduce the spaces dedicated to fishing. And then the capacity of the islands. Regarding the capacity of the islands in general, we try to understand the magical number beyond which tourism puts some pressure on the ecosystem. But of course, the concept goes beyond of the numerical impact, because it emerges, the carrying capacity it emerges when tourism compromises the continuing of the daily life. So the daily life has to be protected. But also tourism for them is a social and important part, because it permits to be open, to maintain open some social activities for the residents that are for the tourists, but in the meantime, thanks to the tourism, it could remain open as pub, cafe, and restaurant. And that, of course, you understand that in a little island, they are so important, the part of socialization. The last part is regarding, I ask, which type of tourism do you want to have an idea? So thanks to the answer, what I can say is that they want, because when I ask them, do you know what is regenerative tourism? They told me, no, I don't have any idea. But in the interview emerged the principle, thanks of course also to the question that stimulate them to reflect about the regenerative approach. And then what emerged is a model of regeneration and resilience. So tourism has to support the main economical activity, that is the fishing. The economic of stay, so tourism is of course, for them, an economical activities, but especially social and also demographical opportunity to maintain the young adults on the island, so the economy of stay, and try to avoid the problem of hit and run tourism. So try to maintain more the stay of the visitor on the island. And as I told you before, a strategy of sectoral support. So as you can see, the principle that we see before are part of our life, of the daily life. The question is how we can to understand that, not the question, but understand that every action can have a huge impact on the entire ecosystem. We are in the nature and not outside the nature. So I finished my presentation, and I'm glad to give the floor to Anne-Heide Hansen from Nordland Fylkeskommune. I'm so glad about this because Nordland County Council decided to develop their strategy on the regenerative tourism approach. And so, Anne-Heide, we share with us some insight about the strategy and some concrete case study from the territory. So, Anne-Heide, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Den PDF-en. Ikke den der. Du må ha PDF. Ikke PDF. Det må være PowerPoint. Nei, jeg tror det der er PDF. Det der. Excellent. Thank you so much, Marcia, and thank you so much for inviting me to come here. My name is Anne-Heide. I work at the Nordland County Administration with tourism, And I'm so excited to be able to be here today to talk about regenerative tourism, because it's been really our focus for the last few years. And thank you, Marcia, for giving this really good insight into the mindset. And I will now build on that and talk about how we have been working with this at the regional level. And I think also my presentation will be available afterwards, because I put in a few links. If you will be interested in having a deeper look, it will be possible. So, Nordland is the first county in Norway with a regenerative tourism strategy. And I have brought with me some of the short versions of the strategy, which will be available down there if any of you are interested in having a deeper look. One of the main strategic measures in the strategy is to mobilize for the transition towards regenerative travel. And the whole strategy is really socially focused, because that's what we do in the county council. We don't work directly with companies, but we work with the development of local societies. So our vision is that visitors can contribute in a way that leaves the destination in a better way than when we arrived. And these are the hairy goals of the regenerative perspective. Now, for the last 8 to 10 years, we have experienced some key challenges with tourism. And I think, I'm sure you are familiar with this, because they seem to be universal and global, and this is an effect of tourism. And I have some local clippings just showing you a few of the key challenges. It's the infrastructure. Like you said, we have narrow roads. There are a lot of illegal parking. People are here for once in their life, and they just don't care, and they park there, and local people worry if the ambulance or the fire truck will get there if they need them. It's the toilets. Of course, it's toilets, and they don't have the capacity for the number of people using them. It's waste management, and this is a big issue with the locals, the increased littering. It's safety, and visitors are being killed or having to be rescued while enjoying our mountains. Or this winter we had a lot of traffic accidents because visitors lack the skills needed to drive safely on icy roads. It's also the strain on the local communities who have to watch their beloved nature get worn down, or situations where the locals are outnumbered by visitors. This is from Vega, where there were 5,000 to 6,000 people there, and there are 1,200 inhabitants on the island. Or it's unwanted behavior. This is from Lofoten Kabelvåg, where this woman was bothered with tourists filming through her windows. And she had to build this kind of to try to stop them from doing that, and her neighbor started to call her house the Fort Knox in Kabelvåg. Or this, the Airbnb challenge, which is also known, where it's making it very hard to rent houses for a long-term basis. And this one says that the nurses have to stay in the barn because there's no houses available. I think the general problems are that visitors are often overlooked in public management. And there are a lot of different actors that has to be involved in solving these challenges. So why did we choose a regenerative approach? I think tourism can be seen as imported consumption. And it benefits some, like the tourism industry and shops and so on, but it affects us all as a community. We are all hosting the visitors that come. And tourism's long-term success depends on a good relation to the local residents. Otherwise, we will see this protest with tourists go home. And it's not nice to be a visitor in a place where you don't feel welcomed. And I think it's really important to hear the voices of the local inhabitants it's important. It's a key in local democracy. And it's a key in the living system, as you showed us. And it's the regenerative mindset and values that addresses these elements and focus on enhancing, renewing, and strengthening local resources. And Marcia, you mentioned the indigenous people, and I think this is, when we were doing the strategy, we were asking ourselves, because a lot of people haven't heard about the regenerative, like you showed in the beginning of your speech, but is it new or is it really old wisdom? And in Nordland, we have the Sami people, and it's a really rich culture, and in our county, we have 5 different Sami language groups. And in the strategy work, we got inspiration from them because they were really having some values that underpin the regenerative mindset. Like this, all life is equal. Humankind is not superior to nature. Everything is connected. This is the ecological perspective and the living system perspective. And it implies that we need to have a holistic approach. This one, in order to get, we also have to give. And these are the traditional values about harvesting. And I think the fisherman in the first video also talked about this. You know, there are changes happening, but how can we make this, that we can do this forever? So it's about, you don't harvest more than you need, and it's this talk about balance. And I think in today's society, we talk a lot about infinite growth. With us. And then it's the Sami culture, they relate to 7 generations, the 3 before us, the present, and the 3 to come. And this is the long-term perspective and caring for the future generations. So building on these values and on the regenerative perspective, we have been looking for new tools. And one of these new tools is the 5 questions that you mentioned, Marcia. And we have adopted them from Ireland and worked together with Cillian Murphy from Loophead Peninsula. And these are the 5 essential questions that we should all interact and discuss and debate in order to get good development of tourism and a bottom-up approach. This is not something for the experts, this is for everybody to discuss. They are both relevant for over-tourism and under-tourism. Like Røster wants more tourism. These are still main questions to be asked. And they have to be asked in a specific order. First, you need to start with a basic questions. First of all, do we want tourism? And if the answer is yes, why do we need them? What will they do for us? And how will tourism contribute to our community? And answering this question and even debating it will give a purpose and a role of tourism. What kind of tool do we want tourism to be for our local development and where we want to be in the future? The second question we need to ask ourselves is, what have we got? What kind of local resources do we want to build on? It's important that we do that discussion and not leave this to be defined by some external actor. What do we think about this? And just as important as that question, what do we not want to show? For example, because it's vulnerable. So how can tourism contribute to strengthening the local resources and maybe even contribute to solving some of the local challenges? The third question is, where and when do we want visitors? Are there times or places where we don't want tourists? And it's important to hear the local people's opinion about this, because they will, when we have done these processes, they will know, they will talk about which areas where they want to, where it's too vulnerable to invite a lot of people. And it's not about really how much the local people will have to tolerate. It's about respect and the understanding, the reduction of friction, and building a positive relation. Now, the fourth question is to ask, who do we want to invite to our home? And today, with a lot of information in social media, this can be a tricky question because a lot of people come and invited. But at least we can decide who we actively want to invite to our home. Who are our ideal visitors? And when we ask local people this, we ask them, who do you look forward to coming to visit you? And they know which one they prefer. So I think this is also important. And it's not about the money most of the time. It's not the high end. It's about the relationships. And tourism is about co-creating experiences. Now the last question, which is the marketing questions. How do we attract the right customers? Because now we, instead of asking this first or asking this as a general question, when we ask it now, we are targeting the question and we know who we want to attract. And that could also be called responsible marketing. Now we have tried to apply the regenerative values and the 5 questions in how we work with tourism from the county administration. And we have tried to work from a bottom-up approach. Now this is still work in progress and it's ongoing, but at this stage I would bundle our work in 4 main categories, and I would like to give you some concrete examples of what we have done. The first one is to have a dialogue with the communities and engage them in discussing what kind of tourism they would like in their community. And we have worked very closely with 3 different communities in the Lofoten Islands to develop this course, a crash course in visitor management, which is really a self-organized course that can facilitate the discussion around the 5 different questions. And we have translated this brochure into English, so that's good news. And you could download it from that link. And I wanted you to hear the voices of the people the local people we collaborated with, and we have made a short video for 2 minutes, but we have English subtitles, so I would like to show you some of what they say about this course.
Det kom ut et punkt der septiktanken var full, og vi hadde ikke vann igjen i brønnen.
Crashkurs, det noe jeg har hørt ordet før, så jeg var jo egentlig ikke forberedt hva det dreier seg om.
Crashkurset var jo en litt sånn oppvåkner på det her med å tenke større og helhetlig rundt turisme. De her spørsmålene fikk oss til å tenke og kanskje se turistene i sammenheng med andre ting som vi kanskje ikke hadde tenkt sånn ordentlig på.
Det er klart at det er mange bekymringer om det her at det blir for mye turisme, og det går utover livskvaliteten til folk.
Vi ønsker å få hjelp til å finne gode løsninger, sånn at alle kunne trives og ha det bra.
Gjennom crashkurset så prøvde vi å gå gjennom hele systemet på Eggom, fra du kommer inn til Eggom til du kjører gjennom gården der så det bor folk, og så ut til utmarska.
Så kurset var jo sett i et system som har forskjellige løsninger og forskjellige problemstillinger som ikke vi har tenkt på egentlig.
Vi har en idé om at vi skal styre denne turiststrømmen i stedet for å bli overkjørt av den. Og den kunnskapen om hvordan vi skulle gjøre det, den måtte vi lære.
Now, in addition to this involving the local people, we have worked with the dialogues within the county administration and county council because we need to strengthen the cross-sectoral dialogue within our company. And really a strategy for us, what we really can do something about is ourselves. So we have strengthened the dialogue, and these dialogues are based on the regenerative mindset and the 5 questions. So we have worked, for example, with the outdoor recreation department, and we're currently doing courses for all the local outdoor recreational groups in the whole of Nordland to discuss this. We also work with cultural heritage, transport and mobility, and of course planning. And I think applying this regenerative mindset is also, you need to work more holistically and coordinated. It's the living system also with us. And this flower is really how we see that tourism have to cooperate with everybody because of the nature of tourism, as we talked about. Now, second, it's important to integrate visitor into municipal and regional planning to ensure the long-term and place-based decisions that support regenerative tourism. And we want to encourage a transition from thematic tourism plans into integrating visitors in the ordinary plans. And we are currently working with 2 big regional plans. One regional plan on area and one on living communities. And we are talking about the regenerative perspective and on visitors as one group that are using our space and services and everything, and we need to be good hosts, so they have to be a part of the plan. And also, as a regional authority, we do consultation responses to municipal plans, and this is also where we give feedback on visitors and regenerative values. And then I think one of the challenges is to strengthen the knowledge base on visitors. So we are currently talking to several municipalities about how they can do the crash courses and develop a knowledge base which will be the grounds for planning and for including visitors in the way they work with community development. And the lower picture there is from Vega, because they are one municipality who has done this. The municipality run several meetings in all the micro-villages on Vega to discuss the 5 questions. And this was the ground and the knowledge base for planning and to implement this in municipal plans. So we're now trying to do this because it's not just the industry. You have to involve public management. Now, politicians is an important group, and we have tried to engage the local politicians. I think they are key to come on board and want to make tourism part of the local development. So we developed a course, a start course, for 1 hour for municipal council members, and we've done this in 7 municipalities so far, but we are looking at it and wanted to make small changes to it now. And in this course, we discussed the municipality's role and scope for action related to tourism. And I think it's important to empower local politicians to support the regenerative tourism and visitor management and the values connected to regenerative tourism or regenerative ideas in general. Lastly, we have been working towards the industry through our collaboration with the Northern Norway Tourist Board, and we had a few projects together. One of them was focused on giving information prior to arrival, and we developed a few videos together, two of them with influencers. The bottom one there is based on a project which got the values of the local people there, and there are two school kids conveying this to the tourists and asking them how this is the way we want you to behave when you come home to us. And we also had a project here with a report on what is responsible marketing and reflections about how can the bottom-up method be used. So, to end this, what does regenerative thinking require of us? I think it basically means that we need to rethink and reshape the tourism model. And we believe that this is a radical innovation that we need to do to meet the current challenges and the future challenges of the industry. So I think the hard part is the system change. And we need to move from today's market-driven system, where we start by focusing on what the market and the guest wants, and then shape our delivery accordingly to match these requirements and needs, and to flip it, bottom up, where we start with the local communities and ask ourselves, how can tourism contribute to the kind of societies that I want to live in? And then search for the matching market. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Heide, really. So I think that the presentation of Anne-Heide has pointed out some key aspects that we talked about earlier. So Nordland Fylke has to manage the politician, how to also reflect how we can involve the community, how we can start a dialogue, and especially the part also of semi-values. They starting, as we told you about unique potential values, they starting from semi-value because it's part of their culture. And she mentioned Vega as a concrete example of regenerative tourism. And now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Professor Dorte Eide from Universitet. She will share with us some insight about two case studies in the Norwegian territory, Vega and Træna. So, Dorte, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Since we're talking a lot about the regenerative here, regenerative actually means also that we need to take care of the well-being and the thriving of people. So then I ask you, please stand up a little bit. I think we need a little re-energizing thing here. So if everybody tries now to stand on the tip of their toes, stretch, stretch. We are stretching towards something new. How do you like it to stretch as much as you can? Oh, and then we bend over if you can because of the shears. And how does it feel to be bent over? Is it good? Which one did you like most? Was it best to stretch? Or was it best to bend over? Happily, we are different people. We might prefer a bit difference regarding that. And also, we might need to stretch sometimes and other times just to bend over. So, because we are dynamic people, so we cannot say that one thing always is the best. And that is one of the things that is argued also regarding regenerative tourism. That is that there is not one solution that can fix it, that works every place, because one place is different from another place. And even the same place changes, is dynamic. So what worked 2 years ago might not be the same that we need 2 years after. So that is one of the keywords of regenerative. You see 2 pictures here. Up here is from Træna, and the other one from Vega, which I will come back to a little bit. I'm also part of the scientific committee, and I work at Nord University, which also is part of a CEU alliance with different universities situated along the coastlines in Europe. So we have had a little introduction now about what is regenerative, and I would say one of the main keywords here is how you understand value. Value co-creation, value degeneration. Because traditionally in a typical classical market economy approach, one focuses on the value of, if the really classical only cared about the stakeholders, the stock shareholders. But most companies nowadays have been for a long time been very much focused on creating value for their customers or users, like tourists and visitors. But also, of course, creating value for themselves as organization. And then often one has been thinking that nature, culture, infrastructure, even humans are resources that we can use and exploit in order to create the value for ourselves and our customers. This is, now I put it a little bit up front so you can see some of the differences. Because when we think about, and of course then, competition, market position, and economical value has been very central in the more classical approach, which you see down here, which has led to a lot of negative impacts on culture, on nature, on the social. But has also created some good. Of course, we cannot just say that, but the focus has been more a kind of greedy ego approach. While then we had a little greening focus, more the green turn. And we talk about more conventional, sustainable approach that has for some time now been very occupied of how to reduce or avoid negative impacts on environment, on culture, or the social. Typically, we have seen a lot of recircling of waste, for example, try to reduce the negative impact of waste. While when we move over to regenerative, we still care about trying to reduce negative impacts, but one becomes much more focused on creating positive impacts, and the type of value we care about becomes much more broader, like well-being, thriving, health of all the stakeholders in the area, meaning also non-humans, meaning also animals, plants, the landscape in a much broader sense. So that is, in a way, the starting point. So it's a different approach to understanding of value. Value for whom? What type of value is it really that we aim for? So we can take this a little step further on, because you can find regenerative approaches in different sectors. Regenerative tourism, that's just one. You have regenerative agriculture, regenerative design of urban areas, regenerative, it's a lot of different regenerative approaches. But they all build on some basic assumptions. And Marcia introduced you to some of them. It's a kind of move away from the more mechanical a single part approach to understand the world or the organization toward a much more living, ecological and social cultural systems that are integrated in each other. So if you do one thing, for example, build windmills, that for one reason you have an argument, it will increase the impact, it will decrease the impacts on the climate. It can create a lot of new kind of consequences, maybe some positive, but also negative consequences. So it means you need to understand the interactions of things in a very different way. So it's not only that you move away from doing less negative to more positive, it's also a very different way of understanding the world. And as Ann-Heidi also introduced, it's a different way of also appreciating and involving knowledge. So it's not only anymore just scientific knowledge or the knowledge of the managers, it's much more bottom-up, much more diverse types of knowing and knowledge that might be important. Meaning that particularly those that live in the local community, what we call the host community, is particularly important in this kind of development. It's a more kind of bottom-up way, and also, as we see here, collaborative and distributed leadership, because it's not, it can be single stakeholders that suggest changes that can be important. And some of these basic assumptions has been then translated into regenerative tourism. But regenerative tourism is still quite a new approach. So it's a lot of things we don't know yet. It's a lot of practicing and developing that needs to be done in order to, before we have more tools and knowledge about how can we actually do this. So we can at least summarize for now that net positive transformations is very central. So it's, and then we mean the positive transformation of the host community, which can then mean the humans, but also other living species in that area. So what kind of implication can this have for experience design? Like, for example, we at Querini that are going to create this route now into some practicing from the plan into some activities. And then we need different kind of offerings for locals and for visitors so they can participate in activities like festivals, like experience offerings at museums, at restaurants, different other places. How should we then go on in order to develop new kind of offerings regarding that? If you look at the more market-based traditional one have focused a lot, as I mentioned, on exploiting local resources and often kind of mass-produce offerings. Also, we have seen for a long time a great focus on growth, often in growth in visitor numbers, growth in economic value, while that is not necessarily the solution for all. Like many places in Lofoten, for example, maybe there is time to start rethinking alternative kind of growth or post-growth or enoughness instead of more growth. But also based on research, we know something about what is important in order to facilitate value for visitors, like the guests that are coming. Like, for example, using storytelling in a good way. Try to develop a good dramaturgy in your experiences. Try to involve good interactions with animals, for example, or objects in order to create value. These are things we know from research for about 20 years back now. So if we look a little bit more on conventional sustainable approaches, we can see that often it's still focused on growth and can use the same kind of tools we have seen before. Storytelling is still important, yes. But you have also had some adjustment so that we try to avoid negative impacts. Maybe not to show all the pictures of Lofoten some places because it's already so hotspots and so many people there that we shouldn't show picture of that, but maybe another place that has few visitors instead. Maybe we need to tell more about how people are to behave, like Heidi talked about, instead of just get focused on getting more people to come there. And we also have had a lot of new kind of tools, like how to sort out the waste, how to try to get people to use more green energy transportation, for example. So these are examples of new kind of tools in a more conventional, sustainable approach. So what will it then be if we look at regenerative? For the first, we must then become much more aware of that tourism is not an isolated system or just an economical system. Tourism is embedded in the local ecological and social system. And one are then asking, how can experience offerings contribute in giving back in a positive way? And if we look at the literature, we find so far, of course, it's still very early in the development, but we find that regenerative experience offerings focus also on experiences for the locals, not only the tourists. That's one. We also see a lot more cross-sector collaboration, not only that those that are in farming cooperate with those that are in fishing or in restaurants, but we also see examples much more of companies that are actually working within multiple sectors at the same time. For example, we have a company called Livland Gård in Lofoten. We have a company at Helgeland that is called Sæterstad Gård. In their products, we see much more focus on the authentic, but also of connecting visitors. Because one argues that traditionally worldview has been so dualistic, so deconnected. Now it's important to reconnect people to nature, reconnect people to the locals, to the culture more in a closer way than just taking a bus through Lofoten or just looking at some objects. You are to actually meet persons, meet in a different kind of way. So all these orange things here are very central. Therefore, for example, it's more central to have more mindful travels, more mindful, slow tourism activities, and also what we call more transformative experiences. We can ask then, what is that? Yes, a transformative activity not only are good at facilitating you so you can actually be mindful and be present in the moment in an experience. That has been central for 20 years. That's what we call like immersion, like Heidi did in her PhD. But today we talk much more that experiences are to be transformative for the person coming. They are actually to learn something that can inspire a more long-term learning and change of the person. But in addition, since we are within the regenerative approach, we also aim for transformation of the local community. Not only the visitors are to transform, we are actually going to transform. Experience products are like a tip of the iceberg, going to participate in the big puzzle of contributing to a positive transformation of the local community. In addition, you see some of the blue things here. Some are working on circularity, some are working on nudging responsibility, and a new kind of technology use. We also see a more focus on the social inclusion, for example, of people that don't have the money or have the physicality to participate. And we also, not least, and here is the connection to Ann-Heidi's talk, a much more multi-leveled focused. So one thing is that you need to develop new, more regenerative experience offerings, but you also need to coordinate it much better. Your portfolio of experience products are going to work together, not only within an organization, but with the other providers on a local place. So we all know that from work environment research, that one pressure can be possible to tolerate, one thing here and one thing there, but the total pressure of a person's work environment is the totality. The totality can become too much. So we need much better coordinated development and productions of experience othering offerings, and then also the public governance need to take a role into that, because they also can facilitate, or they can even have to do changes themselves. So if then we move quickly to these two cases, Vega and Træna. We are here now, for those that are not locals. You have Røster here, some of you are going there tomorrow. We have Træna down here, it's also a small island. And we have Vega down here, also a small island. Everything is in Nordland County, where we are now. So what did they do in Vega that made the change? My first time at Vega was when I was 2 months old in 1963, because I was baptized in Vega. And I have been there every summer in my whole life. And during the 80s, 70s, youngsters, they didn't know much about their own coastal culture. They didn't know about the eider duck culture, which is some of the specialities in Vega, but it also was common in northern Norway, other places. And then some of these people, particularly this woman here, Inga Næss, but also a few others, started to do interviews and look around in order to gather the knowledge, because many of these women that had practiced this culture of eider duck down care, they were getting old. It was a risk that the knowledge would die out. The practice had almost died out. So they started documenting it, writing books like you see here, writing other reports, which also became very central when they later applied to become UNESCO, got the UNESCO status. They started to motivate different people in order to start networking, creating formal and informal networks like Nordland, eider duck network. They started learning. People started to learn about the knowledge, about the culture, but also how to do the culture. The skills of building eider duck houses, as you see here. The skills of making the nests, of taking out and cleaning the down here, because they used it to make duvets. And it could cost 60,000 Norwegian kroner for really big, heavy duvet. Also, they started to rebuild buildings. Many buildings had been quite old. They started to develop experience offerings and also cultural attractions like museums. And so they started to disseminate and share the knowledge. But one of the very interesting things about Vega is that they didn't only do it for tourists. They have really put a lot of effort into creating activities where also children and youngsters and the other locals can learn. So they have projects in kindergartens, in the primary school, So it has become a knowledge part of them, which they have become proud of. So that, I think, is some of the very special things here in this area. So what do they say now? Many of them say, before when I was younger, and if I went to Brønnøysund, which is the closest city, they said they was shameful of being an islander. They were looked down on by the other people in Brønnøysund or around. But now this has changed. Vega has got a lot of attention. It's happening, good things there that has revitalized not only the culture, but also their identity, their proudness, the activities going on there. So that's quite interesting to see. And also as part of this, it has been different activities going on. Now it's not only cultural experience, it's also nature-based experiences and food experiences and accommodation and all of these things. But one of the things that they were really good at was that they started rather early, after they got the World Heritage status, to build interdisciplinary teams to work with how are we going to develop our community. And they started also, as Ann-Heidi mentioned, they also started to do different dialogues in different small villages about asking this question, do we want tourists, what type of tourists, when, etc. So locals could participate in this development. If you look at another example, so if you go back very quickly here, you can say that Vega is a good example of how you actually revitalize a culture that has almost disappeared. So what is it with Træna? Træna is another type of case that can give us some learning. Træna has done a lot of different development activities during the last year. So it's not only voluntary tourism, which I will introduce here. They have done a lot of festivals. They have done different, that had put them on the international map. They have done what they call workation, as people can take their work with them and sit some other places and work and become integrated in a local community for a while. But volunteer tourism is something that Træna have tried, I think, 5 or 6 times now. I was participating last fall in September when these examples are from. The plan here was then to recruit international tourists to participate in activity. And they actually got articles in New York Times talking about it, and it was more than 100 people that have applied to come to Træna when they had to stop the application process because they couldn't handle it. So the plan here was that we were going to repair some hiking trails. In addition, we were also motivated to help with gathering plastic, because in the ocean it comes in a lot of plastic on the beaches and areas around. So here you see some example. It was 12 international visitors participating in this restoring. In addition, we also had different kind of guided and self-organized experiences. Some were out in the night hunting the polar lights. We had organized meal. All the meals were organized. We had a lot of nice storytelling, etc., etc. We had hiking on some of these peaks you can see over here. So what is it that attracts the visitors? What value does it have for them? I done interviews both with visitors and locals. And visitors argue that this is great nature experience. We had hiking, we had polar lights, etc. But also many of them said it felt very satisfying to help by doing work, Many of them even said, it was too little work. We want to do more work. We want to stay longer. They also argued that we got great food and stories, but also they had a kind of connection to places and to the people in a very different way that they had experienced before. Because often they say a place is so standardized. You find McDonald's everywhere. You find a lot of things is so standardized. While there you actually meet unique, real people. And you connected with them. And they told stories. And we could ask questions. And we could actually have real dialogue with these people. That was very, very unique for them. If you look at then the residents and those that organized it, some of they say that it is a kind of at least temporary transformation of the host community. And it must be seen in addition to all these other projects that they have together, because in sum it contributes to a transformation, not only each little small piece. It contributes to restore the hiking trails and pick up garbage. So it has a restoring element, but also they argue it has a kind of revitalizing element into it, because it brings in not only more hands helping to do the activities, but also it creates a kind of energy for the local place. It creates activities outside seasons, but it brings in something. People are willing to come from other places to actually help us do changes here. They even pay for it. And they are amazed about that. And it puts the place on the map. If they have good people at the marketing and get things out in the newspapers, it also becomes visible. They are far out in the ocean, and it becomes visible, even in New York Times. For the locals as well. So also locals help restore the hiking trails, help participating, storytelling in the meals, participates in the meals. And the interesting thing here is that they say it brings in new energy. Even to them, because it can be hard to do all this restoring and revitalizing alone. It's good to get in some new people sometimes that can actually, what you say, pull up your sleeves and actually do something. We do it together. So it gives them a good new energy. So just a few closing remarks. I think it's important, and I suppose already there is an overall aim with the cultural root, but I think also it's important in order to get the bottom-up energy to do things. We need also regional and local aims connected to the Querini route. We need to involve also students, and we have already done it, so one bachelor course and one master course, so it will be an e-book coming out giving some examples from that, and we then cooperated with the Jektfors Museum, which you have just visited. But I think I would throw out, we could have a regional PhD or postdoc to contribute in the further on, and also, of course, have more regional innovation and research projects, because if you're really going to have activities, because some of these cultural roots are just, what I've said, rather dead on the internet. They say something like this, and these are the partners, and maybe some of the partners meet once a year to share some Viking knowledge or whatever. But if it's going to be a vibrating roots that really matters, we need activities coming up, festivals, experiences, good meals connected to these. We need activities going on so people want to participate in it, both visitors and the locals. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dorte. So, thank you, Dorte. You put on the table a lot of hot points, okay? And also thank you for showing us two different approaches to regenerative tourism in a different way in Trana and Vega. And also thank you for the final remarks for Via Querinissima that as we talk about the living system, of course, a cultural root is a living root. So, and she mentioned before an e-book that will be published in September by Via Querinissima Association that we reflect about this living heritage that each country is managed, starting from Pietro Querini's story, and you will find Dorte Eide's work with her students. And then Dorte also talk about how everything is interconnected in a living system. And of course, food is an important part. Food is culture that, as a community, had the possibility to share, but also is a possibility to learn. So I'm so glad that today with us there is Xavier. He is project manager of Coco Sapiens, and he will talk about the regenerative approach in the food system. So thank you, Xavier, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah? Perfect. Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, everybody. I'm very glad to be here. I was maybe repeat many of the concepts, but focus in the food systems, because maybe each part of each other we focus in different aspects, but we realize that the focus and the rethinking, how we rethink everything is more or less. We go across the same path. And this is why I want to start about what really means to regenerate a territory. In the food systems that I want to talk about, regenerate, it's a word that usually reminds us regenerative agriculture, that is something that everybody. We used to hear this term many times, but this term is still not defined. And most of the times when we talk about regenerative agriculture, we are focused mainly only in carbon capture and in the health soils and how we treat the plant. But many of the aspects are focused just in this, no? And what I will explain here now is when we talk in Coco Sapiens, when I will talk about regenerative agriculture, we will talk about regenerative agriculture in the applications in the food systems, but we're gonna take the whole picture. We're gonna have a 360 degrees about not only in the soils, but about how the food is distributed, it makes the distribution, how the food is produced, how the food impact in all the territory. And this means that we're gonna focus in the next points. Exactly. So we're gonna focus on regenerative agriculture, short consumption, short chain consumption that makes available to make the traceability from the product to where the product is consumed. And this is why we need to think about how we can implement these things, no? We have many studies who say that regenerative agriculture, local farming, short consumptions are more healthy for the soils, more ecological, more dependent, resilient in the territories, because regenerative agriculture don't use fertilizers derived from the gas or the petrol. And also, when we have the big picture and we take regenerative agriculture in the 360 degrees, we also integrate biodiversity of seeds and other aspects, no? And then if we have a lot of studies who say that this kind of system, a regenerative food system, is good for the health, is good for the planet, is good for the environmental, why we don't use it? What's the problem, no? To answer the question, we need to understand how it works, the global food system. So I'm gonna try to be fast because it's very complex and very concentrated, but the global food systems is a chain each part of the chain is specialized in one thing. It means that one seed can be developed in one country, then the seed can be planted and grow in another country. These seeds go to feed animal to livestock in another country. Then the stocks are going in another country or region. And this makes each company is specialized in one thing and is divided, no? Then it can be packaging, plastics, distribution, consumption, hospitality, restaurants, retail, etc., etc. So it's very complicated to make this traceability, because when we eat a pork, and we eat a salmon, and we eat whatever, really we don't know the feed where it's produced. It's very complicated to make this traceability, no? And so when we talk about global food markets, food is treated as a commodity. It means that the price is the only thing, or the most important thing, that makes this specialization, no? So we make the best tomato that is improved to be in a camera, to be in a refrigerator, to be transported. So the main focus is not the taste, the main focus is not the territory, is not the identity, is how we can produce in a low cost and export this. And why? Because the food have the same price in all the world. So these companies who works to provide food in the systems, what they do is to try to competence with each other, and this is why they are very focused in one specialization of the chain. These things means that most of these systems try to lower the prices. That means, as we have a lot of cases to this, degrades soils, degrades the water systems in territories, and also create poor infrastructures of labor, precarity in the landscapes, etc. And this is why, because the chain is completely broke, we need systems to make traceability in order to reconnect customers with farmers. And this is why we have a lot of labels like bio, a lot of things, labels that trying to reconnect and to control a system, but it's the main system that is the problem. It's not trying to organize or try the way to do it better. The system doesn't work in terms of sustainability. It works in terms of capital. It concentrates capital, it makes companies, big companies, shareholders to have more money, and in terms of capitalism it works, but it doesn't work. Definitely in terms of identity, we lose identity. We eat the same food and the same products in around the world, in all the airports, in all the countries. Why? Because we eat the same products. So this is why we need to understand why it's important to connect producers, hospitality, and consumers between tourists. We talk about this. You everybody, I think we touch this thing, no? as if we work together in an integrated systems, then we can integrate regenerative in a holistic way. Okay, there is not regenerative without food systems because I say tourists eat 3 times a day. So this is the main point of my speech today. It's like we cannot understand tourism without thinking the food system. The tourists go in a place and they can eat. They eat, maybe they don't know what they're eating, maybe yes, but they can eat. Or a system connection with a connection between a regenerative agriculture with the determinate practice that makes short-term, not use of plastic, connect distribution, that make value to all the hospitality channels, and then you can control and you can create value to the territory, or B, you can just go in the global markets, and then we have no traceability about what we eat. It means that we cannot talk about regenerative tourism, or maybe we cannot know which impact we are creating if we go in the global markets. So now, here I want to explain like the territory shape the product. The products have identity. This identity can be genetic. This identity can be food heritage, recipes. This product creates experience or creates value to create experience to the hospitality, restaurants, bars, retail. What we export, what we want to show to the tourist. It means that with this experience go to the consumption and then it comes back. It means the consumption, the tourists can contribute to create value in this local production in a hospitality retail experience. So it's mandatory, I think, take the identity to create or to make the value for the regenerative food production. Okay, now it's going back again. It's like, what happens if we break this chain that we create in the last slides? If you are disconnected, we are dependent for the petrol, dependent for the prices in the global market, or the crises we have. Everything is connected in this global market. So whatever is the problem in one country, the price is going to grow. And what is proved in regenerative agriculture in local farming that we have, for example, fisheries that pack the prices for the restaurants in Catalonia. That creates that doesn't matter what happens in the global markets because you always sell in the same price. No, you can be completely connected. So, in terms of plastic, you talk about plastics. The global food market production, what it generates is plastic around the world because we depend on plastic. It's not another material, or it's very complicated. That is expensive, and so that is cheap, and we can. Transport food in a cheap way, no? So the most efficient way is that we have doing during a lot of years in the markets. It's like the producers go directly to the market and sell the products directly without packaging. In the restaurants and in consumption is the same. And also just the homogenization. If you go in the global market, you lose your identity. If the chain is connected, just the opposite. You have the identity to express to the to the territory. And now, since here I talk about theory. I'll explain a little bit a lot of studies that we have, and they have around the world in different territories. But I want to explain just a very nice example of one Coco Sapiens producer that it's in Mexico, Mestizo de Indias. Gonzalo, it's the owner or the president of this organization that they accomplish all the standards, all the needed that we are talking about. No, it's not only about that. There are regenerative in new techniques. Also, there are regenerative in old Mayan techniques in Mexico that they use milpa. Milpa, it's a way to cultivate vegetables that they mix 3 different vegetables in the same beds in an old way to grow markets. This is the big how they grow the vegetables. And these 3 vegetables compensates each other, so it maintains, it has been like this during centuries. So it's a proof that this how we can do, how we can cultivate vegetables and create the possibility to not degrade the soils and continue operating during a lot of years. No? Not also, they work about recuperate seeds, all varieties of vegetables, and they sell directly to the restaurants, hotels in the area. But we are talking here not only about that this guy is producing a very nice food, high quality, etc., but how the experience, how the product, how landscape can be just the main point for the tourist. So these are a lot of hotels around this this area, who is big companies who is starting to go there just because it's cheap, just because they have an opportunity, just because they create just business models to the companies. But then they start to see that looking in the farm, they create experience, they create value to the tourists, and now these are one of the main points to the customers to go there, to the hotels, to visit this place. In this place are coming chefs around the world because they want to taste the product and see the product, but also this is not presented as a folklore. This is not somebody is looking in the barrier, looking at the Maya culture in a mirror, in a glass, I mean. But the people go there, they can sit and eat in a dinner, in a lunch with all the producers, and we can talk together and we can be part of the system. That is something that also we can most of you have talked about this. So this is how we stop to consume products and to be part of the products, no? In some way. Territories, I mean. And this is what we do in Coco Sapiens. In Coco Sapiens is to understand that we have different tools to help consumers and producers to identify the good practices. One of the tools is we evaluate the food impact in the Unity product. Also, we create standards that these standards are following for the producers that are in the association. And this is one of the producers. So also we create spaces and consultancy to help growers and producers to transform in the good direction. And to the to the final customer, we create the possibility to know how this food is produced, so how they can use their own sovereignty and they can make conscious decisions. And this is what I wanted to do, is focus now in the tourism, focus on where we are, focus in this event. There is not regenerative without food identity. All the things that we're talking about is we need to focus on the identity on each territory. I think here in Norway, where we are, the video we have seen, its places have something to tell. Its places have something that make unique, that only happen in this place in the world. And this is the only thing to protect and to export and to make just valuable, and that we can close the circle with the tourists. So if we do good practices and this practice go to the hospitality, and the hospitality can bring money and sustain the local farming, is the way, or the way that in Coca Sapiens we see that is the best way to make regenerative tourism possible. And this is all. Thank you for everybody.
So, thank you, Xavier, and thank you for highlight some challenges related to the global food system. Now we have a little time for some questions, so I invite the speakers on the floor, so we can have a moment for some questions. Okay, I take the microphone also. Sorry, Anila. Okay. Okay. So, do you have some questions? Some of you have some questions for our speaker about the presentation about regenerative tourism. Okay, Stefano and Claire. Is working? No, I think that is not working. Okay. It's not working.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was really interesting, and I was thinking a lot about Venice, which is the place I know the best in this case. And I was wondering what regenerative tourism can do with millions of tourists instead of 100 in an island. So, do you think it can work at a larger scale, and how?
You want to start, Dorte?
I have sometimes, do you hear me? Yeah. Sometimes when I've been talking about some of the work we are doing on regenerative tourism, for example, in Rimini or in Split, where I also have been visiting for the last month, I often get the question that, I think this can work in small communities, not in real cities, as they say. But I think it's possible to do it also in smaller, also in bigger cities, because also bigger cities have city villages in a way, city parts. So instead of always starting so big that now we're going to transform the whole city into a regenerative, maybe we could start with some parts of the city and do it a step-by-step way. Because when you're really going to do big changes, you cannot do it all at the same time. I think even though we have to stretch toward the vision and trying to make this bigger step or the more radical thing of going into the regenerative, we also need to take a lot of many small steps in order to do so. Inspiring local communities to find ways to redesign their local areas that can bring something good for the locals, but also can benefit their tourists, visitors. Like, for example, here in Bodø, we have this new sea walking trail. Similarly, you have that in Rimini. And you have a new one also in Split, and it has been built mostly for the locals, but it can also be interesting visits for the tourists. And similarly, you can start to think about different stakeholders when you work on it. Not only just tourists benefit from it, and then you create new types of offerings, new types of infrastructure gradually, in a way. So that's just one thought.
In the perspective of food is very interesting because in Spain, the Ministry of Consumption, I think, with CSIC, if I remember, I don't remember, but they make a study who make, if it's possible, to create all Spain in regenerative agriculture and local farming and agroecology. And they say, yes, it's possible to be 100% sovereignty, so just eat what we have. But what is needed in this system is we see that we need to change our consumptions because we eat a lot of cow meat, for example, that is not for our territory, but we can meet goat or other meat. So I think we have this thing that is very interesting.
And Heidi, do you want to add something?
I think you need to start asking the question, what do we want in Venice? What kind of societies do we want to live in? And who is making the decisions? I think you need to talk to people, and you need to talk to politicians, and you need to have a discussion, because who's allowing every cruise ship to arrive? And what kind of legitimacy should you have in having this discussion with the big commercial actors and with the tourists? I know there's a tax now, and you have to contribute at least with money to go there, but in Vega, for example, they had this discussion because there are also cruise ships wanting to come and visit Vega. And then the tourism responsible at the municipality were talking directly to the cruise ship. And they were sort of like dictating the terms. And they just said, whoa, this is not what we want. Well, we want 50 people to come to this area. No, you can have 25. Guiding 50 people is not a good experience for my guide, so guiding 25 is the maximum. Take it or leave it. They were saying that they wouldn't buy anything. They said, whenever you come to Vega as a person, we show the hospitality by offering you a cup of coffee. Every single person coming off the cruise ship you have to pay for a waffle and a cup of coffee in our cafe. And they said, well, we got all the food on the ship. It's not about you. It's about our feeling as hosts. We care for people. And this is, if you don't like this, I don't think we're a good match. So don't come. And at the end, they accepted the terms. And also the people on Vega, you know, they don't have a big harbor, so they can't actually accommodate for these cruise ships. So they tender with smaller boats from the big ship. And the people at Vega were actually taking coffee and waffles to give to the people working on the boats, you know, transporting people. So coming to Vega is now the favorite thing to do. And it's all about hospitality, and it's about who do we want to be, and how do we want to do it, and then thinking the consequences and actually it's going to be maybe a lot of protests. But if you have discussed this, you feel much safer, and you have discussed this about, well, we have to decide. It's our place. So I don't know. It's a big issue in Venice, I know.
Yes, I just want to add, I totally agree also with Dorte that, of course, it is possible regenerative tourism also in a big city. And for instance, in Via Querinissima, of course, Venice is an important stop. And one of the activities of this cultural itinerary is to develop tourism. But the problem is that in this itinerary in Via Querenissima, we have some countries or places that want to develop tourism, as Røster, for instance, and we have some other places as Crete or Venice that suffer by over-tourism. So the question regarding Via Querenissima is to listen the people who live in the place and try to understand, also linking to the questions of regenerative tourism. They want tourism, and then starting to think how we can make it more sustainable, but also regenerative for a place that is consumed by tourism. And Stefano?
I don't know if I have time.
A very short question, but don't worry.
No, my question was, I found really incredibly inspiring, and I'm a little scared now because of Via Querenissima, how we can, because daughter, you are right, now we are there, but now we have to work really on what is regenerative tourism. But I have just a general question for you. There is a word you didn't use, it's conflict. It's a point. I mean, regenerative tourism, yeah, it's about to ask people, to make questions, and to give people the voice. What about the conflicts? Conflict of interest, conflict of point of view. That's often the problem there. It's a problem in Venice as well as in Lofoten, in Crete, in Santiago de Compostela, and other places along Via Querenissima, a problem of tourism. How you manage the conflict, how you can also the difference of power, the balance of power that come with that. I don't know. I understand it's a big question, but
our experience is that yes, there are conflicts, different layers, but it doesn't get worse by discussing it. The discussion makes you see the point of view of other people, and it doesn't. It's like you said. Every society is unique. There's not one solution. You have to look at the whole thing, and this is why we, when we do these crash courses, it's done within the village, and they discuss this, and there may be unresolved issues. And then it's the information goes to the politicians, and the role of the politicians is to sort of like make a decision, but with a good concept. So it hasn't really been a practical problem. Solutions have been found, and this crash course is also a process. It's 4 different nights that you sit down and discuss this, and some things can't be resolved, but then they can't be resolved. But talking about it and finding some things that we can agree on and starting this process is a good way to start, and at least get it open. And people, the thing to be heard, the thing to be having this discussion, the thing to be involved and not feel, also the politicians told us, we feel that now we have been empowered to do something with this, not just to be overrun by it, and just, you know, the apathy of having a lot of people coming and problems arising. So there's no quick fix. There will be conflicts and conflicts of interest, and at some point somebody have to take a decision, but I don't think the problem is the discussion of it. I think that will really help.
I'm so sorry, I have to stop you there. We have run very much out of time. But now, guys, I have some good news for you. It's very much sweet and unhealthy snacks out in the hallway that you can enjoy and raise your energy levels for the last session. We meet here again in 10 minutes from now. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to introduce Professor Randy L. Davenport from UiT, the Arctic University of Norway. Randy's talk is titled, Even in Foreign Lands, There is Mercy and Kindness, Querini and Cervantes. In it, she explores how the story of Pietro Querini, the shipwreck, and his shipwreck on Røst may have contributed to European cultural history, especially the famous Spanish author Miguel de Cervantes. Fittingly and totally by chance, later this evening, we have a visual theater performance inspired by Don Quixote on the program. But right now, it is time to learn more about the fascinating last work of Miguel de Cervantes. Please welcome Randy.
Well, thank you, Toralf, and I must also start with thanking the organizers for this opportunity to share my research on Querini and Cervantes, especially Marit Laland. So I thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. It feels really good. But anyway, irrespective of any direct links between the story of Querini's shipwreck and Cervantes' epic prose novel, I sustain that Los trabajos de Persiles y Sigismunda, Historia Septentrional, or in this English translation, The Perils of Persiles and Sigismunda, a northern saga, has a lot to offer on the theme of hospitality. In fact, as I have argued in conferences on Cervantes, the novel may be read as being about how one receives foreigners or strangers or the other. There are multiple examples of the action of both hospitality and reception all along the accidental itinerary of the protagonist princely couple of the title, Persiles and Sigismunda, who for almost the entire extension of the novel travel under disguise as brother and sister named Periandro and Auristela, as I will explain shortly. Now I forgot to move this. So this is about an overview of what I will be going through. And as you see, there may be some repetitions of what we've been through earlier today, so I may speed up some places. Because usually when lecturing on Querini and Cervantes, I must introduce Querini. Now, on this occasion, I take for granted that the public is familiar with Querini's story. Well, I assume it's very unlikely that you know Los trabajos de Persiles y Sigismunda. So, in the following, I will therefore trace a short history of the text and a summary of the plot. But first, a few words on Cervantes' biography. Cervantes had considerable experience of sea voyage, mostly in the Mediterranean, although he had also been to Lisbon on the Atlantic coast. He also spent time in Rome in the service of Cardinal Acquaviva before enrolling as a soldier and participating in the famous naval battle of Lepanto off the Greek coast on October 7th, 1571, where the joint forces of the fleets of Spain, Venice, and the Papal States defeated the Muslim Turkish fleet of the Ottoman Empire. Cervantes was injured in this battle. His left arm was maimed, and he spent several months hospitalized in Messina, Sicily, before returning to sea and participating in Don Juan de Austria's naval campaigns in the years 1572 to 1575. On the return voyage to Spain in 1575, the ship with Cervantes is captured by Turkish Berber corsairs, and he is brought to Algiers as a captive. This part of Cervantes' biography has recently been made into a feature film by Spanish film director Alejandro Amenábar, which then is about Cervantes' captivity with a young Julio Peña as a young Cervantes. It is supposed to be accessible on Netflix. I haven't been able to access it from a Norwegian account, but we'll get there. Cervantes is to spend the next 5 years as a captive in the baños of Algiers, that is, the prisons where captives and slaves were kept, trying to escape 4 times before being finally freed by the Trinitarians in 1580, a religious order dedicated to freeing Christian captives. They were able to pay the ransom Cervantes' family could not afford. Although Cervantes, as a young man, had written some poetry, almost all of his literary production is written and published after his soldier years. And certainly his most well-known prose fiction are the product of his mature years. The 2 books on Don Quixote de la Mancha, published in 1605 and 1615, as well as his exemplary novels. The novel which interests us here is his very last piece of writing. He wrote the preface on April 19th, 1616, practically in his deathbed. He died on April 22nd. The book was printed posthumously by his wife in 1617 and was very well received. There were early translations to French, English, and Italian. And here you see it among some modern editions in Spanish as well. And even without having read a word of Cervantes, you are all familiar with his immortal couple, Don Quixote, the knight of the sad countenance, and his squire, Sancho Panza, through image. And you can see, I mean, the image on your right, the drawing by Antonio Saura, which is, well, wouldn't be recognizable if you didn't already know the couple of Don Quixote and Sancho Panza. But of course, you also know him well through language, like in the phrase "to tilt at windmills" or "kjempe mot vindmøller," from chapter 8 in the first book, where Don Quixote charges against windmills, mistaking them for giants. And in this symposium, as Toralf just said, we're so fortunate to have Dick Downey summarizing this very big book, or in fact, 2 big books for us. So I'm eagerly looking forward to tonight's performance. However, since Cervantes' posthumous novel is not known by the general reading public, and I must say neither in Spanish or in translation, I will present a very brief history of the text and a summary of the plot of this northern story. Even though it was well received and highly praised in the 17th century, it was largely eclipsed by the continuous success of Don Quixote, which by literary scholars and modern fiction writers alike is considered a touchstone of the modern novel. And for those of you who are curious about this great novel, there is a recent English translation, which is accessible online, that takes into account the past few decades' considerable research and scholarly attention paid to Cervantes' novel. And this includes the international conference Cervantes in the North we celebrated at the Arctic University of Norway in June 2017. And I think we see here some creatures that we heard about earlier today. A brief history of the text. Cervantes announced to the public that he was working on this novel in the prefaces and dedications of his earlier works, notably in the 2nd book of Don Quixote. This was a common way of promoting one's work, and Cervantes stated famously that this book was to become either the worst or the best book ever written, adding, among books written to entertain. Now, entertainment in this case is not equal to comedy. By the gatekeepers of the Parnassus. With his last novel, which Cervantes himself considered his literary testament, the author aimed at securing his place among the literati of his age. Even more so because with this book, Cervantes refers to the prestigious genre of the ancient Greek adventure and love novels, notably the Ethiopica, the Ethiopian story, or Theagenes and Chariclea, after its protagonists, written in the 3rd century by Heliodorus of Imsa, a Syrian author writing in Greek. This novel was translated to the vernacular European languages by the humanists of the 16th century and hailed as a model for the epic in prose by the literary scholars of the age. So when Cervantes advertises his intention to not only imitate, but to compete with Heliodorus, he consciously puts the stakes high. His most obvious imitation of Heliodorus is starting the narration in the middle of the action, in medias res. Inherent to the genre of the adventure novel is also that the princely protagonist couple is constantly put to the test on an accidental and challenging voyage from their northern homelands to Rome, which is the Catholic goal of their journey, and where they are finally married, having remained chaste all along the route, which is another prerequisite of the genre. I admit that this complex novel requires quite a bit of unpacking for the average reader to really enjoy it, but I assure you it's worth the effort, in particular for Norwegian readers, because in what other texts in a major, by a major canonical writer of the most spoken European language, which is Spanish, do we encounter a protagonist who has Norwegian as his mother tongue, and where ships are frozen in the glacial sea, or where the phenomenon of the midnight sun and polar night is described? As you can tell from the images and maps, our protagonists are from northern reigns, the island kingdom of Thule, which is the home reign of Persiles, and Frislanda below, which is where Sigismunda comes from. Note that the fictitious island of Frislanda appeared on maps until well into the 17th century, when the increase in voyages towards the north made it clear that this island clearly did not exist. So then it disappeared finally from the maps. Now, why on earth did Cervantes place his princely protagonists and much of the action up in northern Europe, in El Septentrion? One reason is that these were the most unknown regions of Europe to Cervantes' implied southern meridional readers, which permitted the author to stretch the verisimilitude of the action. With his northern story, Cervantes includes the last blank spaces of the European geography into European narrative. He expands the novelistic space, so to speak, placing Norway as well as islands in the North Atlantic center stage of the novelistic genre, while playing consciously with the ambiguities of the northern geography. Now here is a brief overview of the structure and geography of the novel. It is divided into 4 books or parts, which was common at the time, each consisting of about 20 chapters, except the last, which only has 14. And the first 2 books are situated on and in between islands in the North Atlantic and on the North Norwegian mainland. The fact that these locations were not very well known among Southern Europeans does not mean that Cervantes made them up. On the contrary, he took advantage from available, updated knowledge of his time, like maps, probably the Carta Marina by Olaus Magnus, the last Swedish Catholic bishop printed in Rome in 1539, or the several editions of the Dutch cartographer Abraham Ortelius's maps, and travel writing. For instance, on the expeditions to the Northeast and Northwest Passage, which were being explored by navigators and commercial interests since the late 16th century. William Barent's 3 expeditions being a case in point. We'll turn to the links between Querini's account and Cervantes very soon, but first let me present the argument of this northern story. So I'll give you sort of a brief overview of the plot. A very simplifying summary of the plot of this complex adventure and love novel that boasts more than 70 characters and covers an extensive European geography of both maritime and land-based reigns is as follows. Sigismunda, who is crown princess of Frislanda, is sent by her mother, Queen Eusebia, to the neighboring reign of Thule, under the custody of Queen Eustochia because of the threats of war. That is, she's placed there to be safe. But she's also promised to the hereditary prince of Thule, Maximino, who is away on warfare and only knows Sigismunda by her portrait. However, his younger brother, Persiles, falls helplessly in love with Sigismunda, to such an extent that he is taken seriously ill and his mother fears for his life. She therefore invents the wiliest subterfuge of sending her favorite son, Persiles, and Sigismunda on a pilgrimage to Rome, disguised as brother Periandro and sister Auristela, to receive or perfect their Catholic instruction, while the true intention is to remove Sigismunda from Maximino. And as the German saying goes, wenn jemand eine Reise tut, so kann was erzählen. And there seems to be no end to stories of adventures and tests the young couple must endure on their way. Captivity by barbarians, several shipwrecks, rapture by pirates and separation. Periandro's ship gets stuck in the glacial sea far north of Norway, much like what happened to William Barents. And Periandro and Auristela are both the object of undesired love interest from kings and princesses, sorceresses, and even a Roman courtesan. Why? With deathly jealousy as a consequence. Other features are cross-dressing, multi-ethnicity, and numerous headstrong and active female characters. And all along their route, Periandro and Auristela meet a great variety of strangers or foreigners from different nations, speaking different languages, and displaying different customs. Distinct customs, sorry. Their stories mirror, or by contrast, reflect the love story of the protagonist couple, also serving as instruction to the future king and queen. A salient feature of the novel is the upsetting of preconceived ideas concerning who represents barbarism and who civilization, or rather, the proper Christian Catholic virtues. The novel is set to the mid-16th century, that is, the time of religious upheavals in Europe between Protestants and Catholics, while also Jewish and Muslim characters are represented. As the action moves from the northern to the southern hemisphere, it becomes clear that barbarism and virtuous behavior does not pertain to either northerners or southerners, but is rather evenly distributed among all peoples and places. The displacement of the characters through exile, forced travel, voluntary pilgrimage, or otherwise, placing Spaniards, Portuguese, French couple, or Italians up in the north, and northerners like Persiles and Sigismunda, or the barbarian woman Rikla and her children in the south, puts these intercultural encounters center stage. What was for a long time the dominant interpretation of the novel as being a counter-reformationist apology of the protagonist's travel from a barbarous, dark north to the enlightened and civilized south, with Rome as the ultimate goal, simply doesn't stand the test of close reading. For instance, of episodes where foreigners or strangers represent virtuous behavior, while Spaniards or Italians recur to violence and vice. As the image of the external structure shows, the novel starts in the middle of the action, in medias res, as did Heliodorus' Greek novel. And it should also be noted that the true identity of the protagonists is not revealed to their traveling companions or to us, the readers, until the very last chapters of the fourth book. Now, finally, let us turn to the link between Querini and Cervantes. And as this slide is trying to tell you, this link is has a second source, which is very important, but also for our knowledge of Querini, which is, of course, Giovanni Battista Ramusio's work, which I'll come to very shortly. Because as well, most of you know, we owe our knowledge of Querini's account of his shipwreck and miraculous survival to the work of 16th century humanist and geographer and secretary to the Venetian Republic, Giovanni Battista Ramusio, who compiled travel accounts of all kinds from all corners of the world for his major 3-volume work, Delle Navigazioni e Viaggi, And Querini's account is in the second volume, which came out last. Well, because of a fire in the printers. The printing press, and there were several accidents. Ramusio died also in 1557, as you said, so as I showed you earlier. So the second volume came out last with less illustrations and maps than the two other volumes. Well, I will not go into the details there. But as you also know, and we just slightly touched upon this today, is that it's not until recent years that we have editions of the manuscript versions of the accounts. This is an image of the first page from the account in the miscellaneous volume, where it is kept in the Vatican Library, which you can all peruse because Querini is online. He's up to date. It's just you can access the manuscripts at least on screen. But since 2005, we also have this edition in French, Claire's transcription and translation into French of the Venetian, the original, so to speak, aimed at the general public, one could say, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's not until 2019 that we actually get an annotated edition of the Venetian version with Italian notes by Angela Pluda. So this is sort of the text that most people recur to when they want to dig into the manuscript version, because there are differences between the manuscript version and Ramusio's. Now, I've presented works on the links between these three different textual realities on other occasions. So I will not go into this here. My point here is that Cervantes came across Querini's account in Ramusio's version, and he probably did so in the first joint edition of the 3 volumes, printed in Venice in 1606. Even though this can only be conjectured, as Querini's narrative, like so many other shipwreck narratives of the early modern age, were compiled and included in several miscellaneous publications. But I still believe there are sound arguments for suggesting that Cervantes tapped Ramusio's 3-volume edition for descriptions of the North, since, for instance, the accounts of Barents's 3 expeditions are only included in this edition. Now, I will return to the theme of the symposium and briefly discuss the concept of hospitality before I conclude my talk with pointing to what Querini's account may have offered the Spanish novelist and give you some more examples of the topic in Cervantes' novel. Now, asking as Claire Stephanie explained so well this morning. Well, so yes, that hospitality implies offering the welcome to the foreigner, or forastero, as they say in Spanish, that arrives. Secondly, to be able to receive him or her, it is necessary to be in the possession of the place where we receive him, or possess a certain authority to do so. This makes me think a little bit about the last panel discussion, actually. And this is based on Kant, the Kantian concept of universality and justice, not necessarily on charity, which is a concept which is of course the concept we find with medieval and early modern writers like Querini and Cervantes. That is, this foreigner or the stranger has the right to be received without hostility. However, as we will see, some of the characters in Cervantes also lay a claim to universal hospitality. And in the Romance languages, as you can see here, in French, hôte, and Spanish, huésped, it means that both the one receiving and the one being received. So hospitality goes both ways. It's all about reciprocity, which we also heard about earlier today. So this is, yes, an auto-antonym. And this dual meaning is then, of course, also at the root of the English concept of hospitality. But Derrida also emphasizes that hospitality is dependent on one's possibility to affirm oneself in one's selfhood or individual identity, which is equal to stating that no one may be hospitable or that is given to generous and cordial reception of guests in my place. And I take this to mean everyone is irreplaceable. Derrida is here elaborating on the original Lithuanian philosopher who adopted the French language, Emmanuel Levinas. And to Levinas, hospitality is not an ethic, it is ethics. And Levinas' thinking obliges one to respect the other. And I read both Querini's account and Cervantes' novel as offering us numerous and detailed examples of this meaning and respecting otherness. However, not without also acknowledging the difficulties that may arise. Derrida reflects about this in a thought-provoking way on the notion of stranger or foreigner, or l'étranger. No, this was still, yes. L'étranger in French, or el extranjero in Spanish, which both means the foreigner and to be in a foreign place, a foreign country. Because what does that mean, he asks. Who is a stranger? What does it mean to move oneself, to travel to a foreign place or country, or to come from l'étranger, a foreign place or country? And I think, Claire, you explained about that other ambivalence of the concept that holds this as hôte and ennemi, enemy. So how does this double bind concept or triple bind concept come about in Querini and Cervantes? I have proposed in an earlier work that Cervantes took inspiration from Querini's account on the charity and Christian piety of the inhabitants of Røster, in particular the women, in his construction of the character Ricla, a barbarian young woman who received and saved the shipwrecked Spaniard Antonio when he was washed up on the shore of the Barber's Isle. He had fled into exile because his bad temper had caused him to engage in a duel. After her initial fear dissipates, Ricla shows the stranger the essentials of hospitality, giving him crystal clear water to drink and feeding him. Ricla and Antonio become a pair, learning each other's languages. And as Ricla states, Antonio offers her matrimony according to the customs of his religion. And out of this intercultural marriage are born two semi-barbarian children, Antonio Jr. and Constanza. This multicultural and bilingual family will in their turn receive and host our protagonist couple and their company when they, with some other characters, escape from the barbarian chieftains on the brink of sacrificing Periandro and taking Auristela as wife in order to fulfill a prophecy that would give them world dominion. And as I have already underlined, we do not have any textual proof or documentation of Cervantes reading Querini's account. However, apart from the reasonable assumption that Cervantes was familiar with Ramusio's Navigazione Viaggi, there is one passage in Cervantes' novel that, by way of naming, also allows us to speculate in this direction. In the fifth chapter of the first book, Ricla and Antonio receive the protagonists and their companions who are fleeing from the Holocaust of the Barbarous Isle, which is all on fire in civil war, giving them shelter and offering them food in their primitive cave. That is, they are being hospitable to these strangers. The scene is described in this way. The meal was short and spare, yet eating it without anxiety made it delicious. They relit the torches, and although the room became smoky, the food was hot. The dishes with which the meal were served were not made of silver or earthenware. The hands of the two young barbarians served as plates. Bark of the trees, a little softer than cork, served as glasses. Candia's Momsi was far away, so pure, clean, and chilled water served in its stead. And, as you know, Candia was the name usually assigned to Crete, both the island and the port of today's Heraklion. And Candia's Momsi refers to the renowned wine produced on the island, the sweetest variant of Madeira wine, which Querini's ship carried. In Cervantes' novel, the barbarian woman Ricla shows Christian piety and charity in practice before receiving any Catholic instruction from Antonio, the shipwrecked Spaniard who had to flee from his homeland because of his violent action caused by his ill temper. And the novel excels in this kind of reverse examples, that is, foreigners and non-Spaniards and non-Catholics are better representatives of Christian and Catholic virtues than the proper Catholics. The novel upsets the preconceived idea of the civilized, illuminated Southern Europe, with Rome as its virtue center versus the barbarian dark North. We discover that hospitality and charity is found everywhere, as is the contrary. This is reflected in the quotation in the title of my talk, which is from the second chapter of the third book, situated in the woods on the road between Badajoz and the monastery of Our Lady of Guadalupe, when our band of pilgrims are approached by a man on horseback who inquires, an example of the Madeira wine. But let's turn to the quotation, which I use in my title. A man on horseback approaches our protagonists and their small group of companions, asking them, "Are you from here, good people?" To whom Periandro answers, "No, indeed, but from somewhere very far away. We're foreign pilgrims going to Rome, though first to Guadalupe." "Can it be?" said the horseman. Oops, sorry. It seems I have another image on the screen here. I don't know how I get to the quotation. Oops. I'm supposed to move over to that one. Yeah. Well, I'll read the quotation to you. Let me see. Nope. Oh, there you are. Okay. "Well, are you from here, good people?" "No, indeed," answered Periandro, "but for somewhere very far away. We're foreign pilgrims going to Rome, though first to Guadalupe." "Can it be," said the horseman, "that charity and courtesy exist in foreign lands and compassionate souls are to be found everywhere?" Yes, I'm actually here quoting another translations than the one I put in my on the title. Yes. Now, in her illuminating comments on Querini's account, Claire Jules de la Rivière has suggested that the Venetian nobleman's narration corresponds to or relies on exemplary and moralizing literature of his age, as well as on pilgrim and travel accounts. Let me see. She has characterized Querini's text, and I believe quite accurately, as being imbued with a certain moral and psychological introspection. That is, we encounter a self, I, that, in La Rivière's words, this is my translation, stages himself as one who prays, cries, or invokes the Lord. In other words, Querini himself comes close to a character, albeit historical and real, not so distant from Periandro, who by one critic has been characterized as a sobbing hero. Cervantes' hero and heroine, despite their princely origin and status, which should imply infallible virtue, as in the genre of the romance, show sign of changes brought about by their many encounters with strangers, which come close to a psychological introspection we associate with the novelistic genre. A parallel to the hosting or reception that Ricla and Antonio offer the protagonists and their company following the in medias res of the novel's action comes about when the band of pilgrims, now comprising Ricla and Antonio's intercultural family, reach Antonio's hometown of Quintanar de la Orden in La Mancha, in Book 3, Chapter 9. In the previous chapter, Antonio has inquired that his elderly parents are still alive, because he's been absent for over a decade, and he approaches his father cautiously without being recognized. Diego de Villaseñor is seated on the threshold of his home with his wife, enjoying the fresh air of the evening, this being the days of summer heat. And Antonio de Villaseñor knows perfectly well that there is no hostel for pilgrims in Quintanar de la Orden. But he still asks his own father if there is, by chance, sir, a hostel for pilgrims in this town. To which his father answers that the people who live here are good Christians, so all the houses are pilgrims' hostels. But if there weren't any other, mine, which is spacious, could take the place of all of them. I have some precious treasures out there in the wide world, and I don't know but that right now they might be looking for someone to take them in. Antonio's father here shows his Christian hospitality, at the same time expressing his desire for universal reciprocity, thinking of his long exiled son. When he makes this call for Christian charity, he of course does so as a Catholic, which means precisely universal. And Antonio then reveals that he has met a certain Villaseñor in foreign lands far away who assured him that if he had been in this land with them, they would not be in lack of accommodation. Through this step-by-step anagnorisis, that is mutual recognition between son and parents, that first makes a connection between these strangers and their son, who has been absent for 16 years, the father increases his will to offer the I'll open my heart even wider and outdo myself to be of service to you. And this scene of universal hospitality in the home of the Villaseñor has much more to it, but we'll have to leave it here, and then I'll conclude. Yes, that both Querini and Cervantes emphasize the hospitality of foreigners, or the other. We recall that the Venetian nobleman even contrasts the moral lassitude of his fellow Venetians with the pious rectitude of the Norwegian fishermen and their wives. In Cervantes' northern story, the semi-barbarian Antonio Jr. conducts Periandro and Auristela and their company to safety from the island on fire with the following words. And with this example of the topic of this symposium, I thank you for your attention. And I'll quote this in Spanish. Vamos, Señor, como tengo dicho, a nuestro rancho para que la caridad de mi madre y de mi hermana se muestre y ejercite en acariciar a estos mis cansados y temerosos huéspedes. Thank you. Whoops.
Thank you so much, Randi. And take this book as a sign.
Oh, thank you.
And guests of the symposium, you now have a couple of hours to do it as you please. Before we meet again at at 7 o'clock, really, at Beddingen Kulturhus, which is just down the pier here, just past the boats until you reach Beddingen Kulturhus. It's pretty easy.
Oy, oy, oy.
And there, you will find a Sami-themed dinner and a great show, even some Sami yoke. It's going to be a night to remember. You should really, really look forward to this. I look forward to seeing you there.